Well, hi everybody. Welcome to the conversation. I'm here with my good friend Jasmine French, who I'm going to call French. That's what I've known her as for years. So, French, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks
this
for
is
having
awesome.
me.
So, French and I go back years. How did we meet? What's sort of our journey along the way?
Yeah, Jackson was my high school history teacher and then Bible teacher. So now I'm 2 years post college grad. So It's been a while.
Yeah, and still getting to connect, which is cool. Like that's what's so sweet about it. So, but obviously for folks that don't know you, why don't you just tell us like how'd you grow up? What's some of your journey been like?
Yeah. So I grew up with my grandparents. I was born with some like drugs in my system, so I wasn't allowed to go with my birth parents, and so I grew up with my maternal grandparents. So still in the family, but more so I didn't really even know that they were not my actual parents until I was like in middle school. I was like, oh, that's why you're so old. Like,
what was that like? Like finding out for you? What was that season like?
It brought up. I didn't realize at the time that it would bring up a lot of like why did this happen? Why was I like not enough for my birth mom to like not be on drugs? And at the time I was like, oh, well, like that makes sense. Like, no wonder you would come to like grandparents' day, like for like when I was in kindergarten. Like,
but you wouldn't have known that stuff when you were little.
No, I didn't. It didn't make sense. And then I don't think I really started processing it until I got into college and I started going to therapy for other reasons. And then I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like why? Like I was feeling like I've always been like I work really hard to try and prove myself to people or like work my way for love. And so I was like, oh, like that makes a lot of sense because I found out this like major life thing when I was a kid that kind of has turned. I was like, oh, like it just kind of clicked after a while. I was like, that's why. Yeah.
So like during that season, like middle schoolish up through high school, how did you process all of that? Like, what was that like? Kind of learning to walk out that obviously massive new reality for you.
My birth mom like has been in and out of my life, so it just like made sense like why that was happening, and it made sense like why my parents were just. I guess it was just like I wasn't like an oops kid. I was like that. I just always like they just happened when they were really old. Like I was like, and it just made. It kind of took background because I grew up with my grandparents. Like they were kind of always sick and ill, so that was always the main focus. So it didn't really, I didn't really realize all the ramifications until I was kind of looking back in college, like kind of reflecting, like, oh, this is what my life, like, it just kind of made more sense.
Do you feel like you had to grow up quick?
Yeah, for sure. So in college, I took the sociology class called, or like Intro to Sociology, and it's like a parent-fied child. And it's more for kids that like grew up with like drug abuse parents or like it means that the parent is like absent from the child's life and so they have to be parents themselves. And I felt myself relating a lot. I was like, wow, like that is me, which I feel like everyone does when they go to a sociology class. But in the same way, my parents weren't absent because of substance abuse. It was just because they literally weren't around because they were either sick or in the hospital or doctor's appointments, and so I learned I had to grow up really quickly because of that. More so, just not that they didn't want to, they just couldn't. Do
so, like at a pretty young age, then, even so, as far as because of where they were at in life, you seems like you had a lot of responsibility on you pretty early. Then,
for sure,
even just with them and
for sure. My siblings, like they grew up a lot different than I did. They were more affected by like seeing substance abuse firsthand and like having more of that be where they had to grow up really, like all of us had to grow up really quickly. I'm more of the sheltered one in the sense of I didn't grow up seeing like drugs happening in the house or things like that, but I had to grow up really quickly in the fact that I had to really be on like what medications were my parents taking, how much were they taking, speaking up when doctors weren't giving them what they needed.
And you were doing that when you were like in high school?
Yeah. So I would be like, I had to be the person to be like, so when is she having, like my mom, when she had to have surgery, so when's her surgery, like what time does she need to be there, all those kinds of things that I just had to be aware of because they're older. There's a lot of elder abuse, and I saw a lot of where the medical system kind of will fail, like the elder generation. And I've seen that firsthand. So more so, I had to grow up a lot in that way. Pretty young.
So what then? Like during like that whole process, what was like, tell me about your faith journey. Like, how did that all come to be for you?
Yeah. So as like growing up and really until I think a lot of my faith has been, what's the word? Like, it's definitely gotten a lot. I've had more roots planted and seen that the trees plant more as I've like college and post college now.
Okay. Yeah.
I feel like during my middle school, high school years, I was kind of, I don't want to say I was blind to my faith, but I was just like, like kind of head in the clouds.
Okay.
Kind of just believing whatever, like I was being taught, like in school or at church. Like, not that those were bad things. Like, I feel like it definitely has laid a really strong foundation. Yeah. But I was never really questioning anything. I was like, oh, well, like the Lord's good. Like, that's why my parents are old. Like, this is like part of His sovereign will, which it is.
Right.
I just didn't think I really questioned any of that until I got into college. I'm like, wait, so how does this, like, okay, look, I believe that you're good, but why is this happening? How did this play into, like...
So, like, some of those deeper questions.
Yeah. So I more so felt that growing, or those questions kind of peering as I got into college. And I think it's more so because I was doing something. Right.
It was your search for the first time.
Yeah, I was like, really. What's happening? Like, what is all this? And I started just asking more questions to the Lord, like, okay, so I get that this happened. How does this play into my story? And it's been fairly painful. I feel like sometimes we think about, like, oh, growth and healing is so, like, la-di-da.
Oh, yeah, but not painful.
No, yeah.
Yeah, which is
sometimes insane. It's better just to be, like, not better, but it's less painful to just kind of...
It's easier to be ignorant of it?
Yeah, it's really easy to just be ignorant. And then when you're like, but when you just have to address it because it's starting to affect your life, you're like, okay, like, how do I navigate this and what does it look like?
So as you got into that process, maybe post high school and into like your college years, and you really began to ask those questions that were your questions, kind of owning them.
Yeah.
What was that like? Like, what were the things you began to maybe realize about God, about yourself?
Yeah.
What were some of those moments like?
Yeah. I realized that, like, I had this kind of arm's distance, like, relationship with God. It's like I had, like, I knew who God was. I know what the gospel is. I know what everything is supposed to be. Okay. But I wasn't really, as I say, like, wearing the coats myself. Like, I saw the coats hanging on the rack, and I'm like, this is cool. But I really wasn't, how does this really play into me? And I would have, like, conversation with other people and, like, really, like, the Lord has something really great for your life, but I wasn't believing any of those truths for myself. I was like, well, like, I'm just like, that's not really for me, like, I'm not that important, or, like, the Lord doesn't really have that in store for me.
So you think you, like, weren't worthy of it?
Yeah.
Like, what?
No, definitely not. It's still something I'm working through, like, feeling worthy that the Lord is actually going to use me for something.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's been interesting.
Yeah.
And still, like, leaning, okay, like, how does, like, still, like, tipping my toe into that. And I feel like once I kind of start stepping even further into it, it's going to be really cool to see it kind of unfold. And just in the past, like, post-grad, like, the Lord has just been like, I'm like, okay, like, it's been playing out a lot, so it's cool.
So I know, like, when you were, in high school and we were around each other all the time, right? What I saw early on in you is, like, a real passion for, it seemed like justice, like the things that weren't right in the world. Yeah. So tell me more about that journey and maybe even where you're at now. Yeah. Like, what did the Spirit of God begin to do in you over the last number of years?
Yeah. No, it was cool when you asked me to do this because I was like, wow, like, Jackson was, like, the first person who really introduced me to justice and, like, how it all plays into. So it really started in high school with anti-trafficking. And I just had a real heart for people who were just being, like, used and forgotten about. And I think now that I've gotten older, it's because I feel like I'm always the person that gets forgotten. So you can
connect to that pain.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, as I graduate, I don't know how far into this I should go, but, like, I graduated.
Go where it takes you. Yeah.
Okay. So, like, in high school, I was in the abolitionist club and kind of helped kind of curate that. And then in college, I was in this club called Live to Free, which is an anti-trafficking mobilization team. Okay. Which is all about the prevention piece of trafficking, as well as some sort of, like, kind of advocating, but also it's more like prevention led. So we would go into all of these different, like, at-risk high schools all throughout the county
And like here in America.
In Orange County.
In Orange County. Okay.
Of all places.
Yeah, I guess it seems ironic. I mean, people are people, but I guess you wouldn't think of.
No, you would like we'd be in Santa Ana, we would be in Anaheim, kind of all over, wherever any school would think of us. And so whether they were just the students themselves were really passionate about it, or the teachers felt that the students needed to learn about what trafficking was and what it looks like for them. So we would go through like, okay, what's this thing called human trafficking? So we go through labor trafficking, sex trafficking, and child trafficking.
Okay.
But also like, how does this play into what could happen to you, like, or a friend?
Okay.
So like the Romeo effect, the boyfriend thing, and how this could happen, and then also what can students do? Because obviously we don't want students like going and running down doors or anything.
Yeah.
So that's where I got introduced into Fairtrade and what that looks like for people and what that kind of looks like on a global scale. And so during my junior year, we put on this Fairtrade fashion show, which was really fun. A lot of work. So we did that my junior and senior year, and that's where I got introduced to Fairtrade LA. And essentially, to kind of give you a background, Fairtrade is just essentially people getting paid fair wages for what they're supposed to. Kids aren't working.
Okay, so what they're producing.
Yeah,
okay,
so for production of like products and anything that we consume, whether it be food or clothing, the production of that thing is not, people aren't being exploited, whether for whatever reason.
How did did the journey go from learning about fighting slavery to then about fair trade? Like are both of those worlds like intricately connected?
Oh, for sure.
How does that work?
So I think when we think about human trafficking, we automatically think of like Taken. Or like sex
the movie, like Liam Neeson stuff,
yes.
right? Like,
like sex trafficking. But what we don't realize is that there's so much of trafficking in the things that we purchase, and how like that, and that plays into slavery. Like people are being held captive for we think about garment workers in India, right? That's like the easiest one for me to go to, and they're being exploited because they're doing work, but they're not getting paid a fair wage, and then they can't work their way out of poverty.
Right.
So it's like, oh well, you have like a job, don't you? But it's like this job is not not sustainable. Two, like I can't pay. Like I'm still paying my bills. So then, like you think about a country where it's easy to sell your kid, right? And then like it kind of can morph into a lot of different things. So, or you think of, I don't know, I can go on and on about fair trade.
Well, like, so then so as you began to learn about like slavery existing in the world today,
for sure,
and then into the fair trade, on a personal level, like what do you feel like the Holy Spirit was doing in you as you begin to uncover, like those are gnarly realities, right? And so, especially at a younger age, what do you feel like God was doing in you as you begin to see those things more for what they are and see those?
Yeah, I feel like the Holy Spirit was really giving me, I think he was really seeing like how I'm like, I need to do something about this. Like, I know I don't want to say I'm too much of a softie to go like busting down doors.
Right.
But I also like, as I kind of got into college, I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to be like on the person like helping someone recover from trafficking or whatever. So I was like, okay, well, I want to do something, but how does this kind of mesh in? And so, because I'm really passionate about it, so what can I do? So that's kind of where the fair trade piece came in. It's like, it's a solution. It's one of like, trafficking is multifaceted, where it's systemic racism coming into play. It's just like where you're at poverty wise. There's a lot of, it's not like a one cap solution. But it's really cool because it allows you to advocate based on your words, but also in your actions, like based on what you consume and how you do that. And so that's kind of where I feel like it's the journey's been. It's like, okay, well, here's like a tangible solution that you can do and really help to progress. Right,
actually do things. Yeah. So like within maybe it's fighting trafficking, whether it's maybe fair trade. Like for you on a personal level, what do you feel like God then has given you to put your hands to? Like what are the things you feel like in your skill set and your gift mix? Yeah. How do you play your role? What do you think, or at least even what are you learning maybe at the beginning stages?
I think it's kind of cool, and it's like this weird, and it's a fun place to be. So I love just like connecting people. Okay. And I think the Lord's really given me this skill to be able to like create and sustain relationships with a lot of different types of people.
So you're a networker.
Yeah. And so it's just really fun to be like, for example, I was just on a trip to Seattle, and I had a friend, and she's getting into fashion. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know this one person from like, I know you're in Seattle, but she's in Long Beach. I think you guys should like connect.
Okay.
And so just to, like, because I have this relationship here, and so to see where that will lead in the future would be really, it's just really cool. So I think that that's been a really cool piece of my role in, and I may not be the person that's going and doing, but I can help you get to that next person on your path to get where you need to be.
Now, on like, is it at your stage in the journey, are things becoming clear on even vocationally what you feel like you're to be doing? Is that still kind of like a nebulous question mark season where you just kind of in that regard?
I know it's something to do with anti-trafficking, fair trade, in like conscious consumerism, that whole world.
What's conscious consumerism?
Yeah, conscious consumerism, or some people call it like compassionate consumerism. It's essentially being aware of what you're purchasing and what that does to, for good or for bad, to the world and to the person who made that item. So, for example, when you buy your, I don't know, your next water bottle, are you aware of like the hands that touch that product, or the tomatoes you buy in the grocery store or whatever? It's just being kind of aware of that piece. The Lord has really given me, I don't know, or maybe it's just a passion that it's kind of come up. I really have gotten into like photography and videography and just doing some more creative stuff, or like website building. So I feel like that's been something that I've seen kind of trickle in a lot of different, like it's been kind of, the seeds are getting planted, which has been really fun. So I feel like that is somewhere I'm going. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I think it's becoming a passion of mine to be like, I want to tell the story of this person, or what this is, whether it be within fair trade or with just with the story that's being told, in a way that like people, it's not so Hollywood, you know?
So like for you in your context, right? So if I get involved with some of these things, right, I'm going to be coming obviously through the lens through which I see the world, right? Your lens is going to be different than mine. And I know one of the things over the years we've talked about is the issue of race and justice, and what it's been like for you, like with how God has designed you, right? And your ethnic makeup. Could you tell some of that journey? Like what it's like just to be kind of walking out in your shoes, seeing some of these things come to light.
Yeah. It's been so interesting, really. And just, again, it's been so cool, just as like some of the layers I've had kind of peel off as far as like me just being aware. I think like, even though I am a person of color, like I always grew up around a bunch of like white people. So it was never, I never felt any that off.
What is your background?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't, sometimes like people to guess. It's kind of funny.
Well, I mean,
no,
I don't know. I don't even know what I would guess.
No, it's so funny.
But people can see you right there.
Yes, true. So obviously African American, that's where my brown comes from. But I'm also part Native American, Jewish, and Middle Eastern.
Oh, wow.
So a really fun makeup. But I would like, if people would be like, oh, what are, I'm like, oh, I'm black, like, or a mix.
Okay, let me ask you this on that level, right? So like when there's, for myself as a white guy, right? There's two different terms, African American and black. The more friends I have over the years, I hear two different answers, and it seems, at least to me, seems to be very personal on which one of those terms you would define yourself as. So for you, whether it's black, African American, does it matter to you? Is there one that definitely does? I'd love just to hear kind of your take on those terms.
It's very interesting. I mean, I know some people will get like offended or kind of be like, whoa, I'm not that one or the other, but I guess it depends on who I'm speaking with. Like, if I'm speaking with someone it's more of a professional relationship, I'll use the term African American because I feel like that's a little bit more just professional. Like I feel like black is more of like a slang. Like for example, like I don't know. Well,
that's why I ask, because it's your I mean, it's your definition of it. I guess I'm not.
It's interesting because I don't fully relate to being black because I did grow up in like surrounded by white people all the time, and so. Like all my family's like, oh, you're so whitewashed, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine with me. So
it's just what you knew.
Yeah, it's just like always what I've known. I've just grew up with like all my friends are white. I mean, I have like a couple of black friends and a couple of like Asian friends. One of my best friends is Salvadorian. So it's just like it's just, I just grew up, so I'm like, I
Right.
don't really know. It doesn't bother me to be called one or the other.
So, like, growing up in that world you grew up in a predominantly white world.
Yeah.
Is that still, like, right now where you, like, your context in life, are you still very much, it feels like, in white culture world?
Yeah.
Or has that changed as you've gotten into college?
Yeah. I think in college, I would still say, like, the majority of my friends were white. And I think it's just because, like, that's just all I've known. And I didn't really base my friendships on race. It mostly was based on, like, similar interests.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
most of the people that were, like, in my, like, justice realm were white, which was, or Latino, or but I do have, I would say, more Black friends than I have in the past, and it is fun to see, and it's really cool to still be a part of that world in one sense, but I don't really feel like I belong in that world either.
Do you feel like you're stuck between worlds?
For sure.
Yeah?
For sure. It's because I was just talking to my boss about this. I was talking to her because it's like sometimes I feel like I have to act Black around Black people or like African American people, and then I have to kind of act more polished around like white people.
Isn't that kind of crazy though? That's even whether good or bad, that's the reality you have to walk through. Wow.
So and sometimes you don't even realize that you're like, I don't even realize that I'm doing it, and sometimes I feel like it's more foreign to me to act Black because I'm just around white people all the time. So it feels more natural for me just to be like polished all the time.
All right, so let me ask this question because it's obviously it's something you and I have talked about over the years, and obviously it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about. So when we think about the way like God has called, like when we think about following Jesus and what he longs for, like even aside from your personal journey, when you think of the church and you think about race, you think about even the realities you just described, having to, in one context, try to act more Black than maybe is normal for you, and then on the other side, acting more white, like you feel like you're having to play to both sides. What do you feel like the church's role is? Let's just take our American context, especially with all the turmoil that we're in the midst of now, right? Like, what do you feel like God would say to the church and how we're to walk out talking about race or interacting with people that have different skin colors than us? What do you think he's after? Or what do you think he longs for, maybe?
I would say, I think it's really longing for there to be understanding on both sides and not trying to change the other side. I don't want to generalize it too much, but I would generalize it to like just culture. Okay. Just because I feel like that's more where the difference is. I have a different skin color, but the difference mostly is our cultures, I would say. Yes, it does have to do with skin tones, but I feel like in the church currently there's a lot of talk like, okay, we want to be more inclusive, we want to have more diversity, and sometimes what I see in church is that there's a lot of diversity in skin tones, but there's not a lot of diversity in the culture of the church.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean?
Does that make sense? So as I went through college and I was trying to find like the church that made the most sense theologically for me, it was like I would see a bunch of different people, but it was as if it was just one type of it was still like one, not I don't want to say race, but just like one culture. Like everyone talked the same, everyone did the same thing. Even like not like in a culty way, but just like everyone had like 2 kids, and everyone like wore, not to be mean, like everyone wore like flannel shirts. And like,
I have a couple of them. So
or like button ups and wore boots, and kind of were like, it was like this almost hipster vibe where it's like, yes, it was a bunch of people that were different races, but there was no diversity there.
So like, what caught you about that? Do you think, should it be different? Like, are you like,
I would think so. Like, I think there should be, I think it should be different. Like, yes, you all believe the same things, like at the bottom line theologically, but I think there needs to be some way for there to be different ways of expressing that belief. Right. Because I feel like it was like always the same way of going about it, and that's not just being like there being like just one like gospel Sunday a month. Maybe that's a start. I don't know exactly what it's supposed to look like in day out. But I think that there needs to be a little bit more, like, I think that's what the Lord's like after is like, yes, we have we believe the same thing. Like hands down, like I think that like a church shouldn't be divided in that way, but like how we express that belief.
So you're saying, like, let's say you've got a church that's diverse with different ethnicities, different cultures in it.
Yeah.
So you're saying, like, ideally, somehow they would, like, each of those cultures would be represented, right? Like, so let's say, like, you were coming into our church, and it was a predominantly white culture, however you would define that.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Okay, so if that would be the goal, right? Because I think of like Revelation 7:9, right? When you say that, right? Like that at the end, every tongue, every tribe, every nation, right? Like God has created us to be that beautifully diverse people.
Yeah.
But like you said, the church, we can be quite divided. Even if, like I said, even if I'm hearing you right, even if there's different races in the room, it can all still meld into almost a monoculture.
Yeah.
And you're thinking they're each going to represent something different. So like, what would it take to get there? Or like, what would it take for a church to actually live out the different cultures within that local community?
Yeah, I think it first starts with like conversation. I think so. I mean, what I love is the church I go to currently is like doing that really well. I see a lot of different types of people, both on stage, both doing volunteering, like just kind of all blended in doing different things. So I feel like I'm really blessed in that sense.
Okay.
But I think what it would take is just like having like conversations like these where it not necessarily that you're all, like I said, like we're having gospel Sundays every week or whatever, but at least like having there be a space for everyone to be at. It's like not like you have to like, well, I'm at church, like let me act more white now because we're at church, even though I'm black.
Yeah.
You know.
Because then it's like we're all trying to fit, almost like fit into this thing. Okay, I see what you're saying.
I don't know like what I think that first step is just like like one acknowledging that like you have multiple people, and how can we not have it be like, okay, well, I think of like for whatever reason like Chinese people or like Asian Americans or things like that. It's like they're at church and then they go home and they like do what they do at home. That's totally different than how they would do it at church.
Like, and it's because you're saying there's not a space for them to exist in their uniqueness. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
I hope that's making sense.
No, I think it is, because that's part of what I wrestle with too, is like, Lord, how do we actually do that?
Yeah, for sure. I think I think the first, I don't know exactly like every, I don't have a plan, but I think the first step is just, or two is knowing that, okay, there's a lot of different types of people here. Right. And then what's the best way to go about.
All right, let me ask you this. Like, okay, so if you're saying there needs to be a space for these conversations, right? That would assume there's not now, for whatever reason. I'm sure there's many reasons. Yeah. Are there certain questions that you think need to be asked that maybe aren't being asked right now? I mean, this is obviously a generalization. Yeah. But like, what would be some of the conversations you'd want to be able to see happen? Whether they go well or not, what would be, are there like driving questions that you think, man, these are the questions that need to be asked?
Yeah. In the church, I would think like the first one that comes to my mind, it could be because of my personal journey, is like the wall of like the mental health conversation and how that like affects different types of ethnicities. Coming from an African American background, like it's something like you go to like, why are you going to therapy? Like why like, and then
seen as a negative, if I'm hearing it. Okay.
Yeah, seen as a negative. Okay. And I only can imagine coming from I've had conversations with my roommate who's Salvadorian, and like seeing how that even how it plays into ethnicity, and then to come to the church even more so. Like, are you not praying hard enough? So like even how that kind of plays into it. Oh,
that's heavy. So like, if I'm hearing you right, so you've experienced like the church not giving enough weight to mental illness. No. Sort of like the trite, you just need to pray more, memorize this Bible verse. That's kind of what you've experienced. Okay.
Versus like there could be some like you may like legit need to like, do you need to be on medication? Do you need this? And so that's like one area I could think of a lot, like more so like on the race piece, like, okay, so how do you navigate walking through like just life with race in mind? Like I don't even think that conversation comes into play. Like when you think about even like small group conversations, like how can we kind of weave in race into just what you would every day do? I don't think, I think sometimes what happened, not that race isn't a big, it's huge. And I hope I want to explain this correct, but similar to how like when you think about politics, sometimes the reason politics are so like difficult to talk about is because there's not an everyday conversation.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's like a forced topic we have to try to talk. Oh, I see. Okay.
So I feel like if we were able to just kind of weave in race into the conversation, it would just feel natural to talk about.
What would be the, like, why do you think race isn't maybe a natural part of the conversation? Maybe for, like, just say, like, for Kirsten and I, right? Like, or anybody really, let's say, in our local church. Why do you think race isn't maybe a natural part of the conversation?
Yeah. I feel like there's two reasons. I feel like there could be questions that are perceived as like being racist questions, or someone doesn't quite know how to word it, so it comes off that way. So I feel like there has just been hurt on both sides. Like,
I see. Okay.
People who are like POC people or people of color who like are being asked questions that you're like, dude, like, why would you even ask that? And so there's hurt on that end, and then sometimes there can be backlash, and so it just like people of majority or white people don't want to be seen as racist. They're like, well, I'm just not going to ask.
Oh, so I wouldn't even go near the topic.
Yeah. So I feel like there's a little bit of hurt on both ends. And so I feel like that's kind of why there's not grace to kind of just like ask and not be afraid. Like, am I offending? Like, I have she's like the sweetest friend of mine. She's like, she'll ask me a question like about my hair or whatever. And she's like, is that like racist to say? And I'm like, no. And I just kind of will reassure her. And I will also let her know, like, in the most gracious way, like, dude, like, don't say that. Like, that's not really, like, you can say that kind of stuff around me, but, like, just don't, like.
So let me ask you, like, with that friend, because I'm imagining, hopefully people listening, like, I can see how those conversations can be scary. You're like, I don't want to offend you. Yeah. And then, I can imagine there being a lot of it. So what do you and your friend have that provides you the safe space for her to ask something that maybe is a racist question, but for then you be able to give her the grace and say, I wouldn't say that. Yeah. Like, what do you guys have that gives you that space?
I think it's the understand, like, one, we just have we have a joint relationship with when it comes to like justice, and she's really passionate about like fair trade and trafficking as well. So we've just built a really good relationship in that sense. But I think it's also knowing her as a person is not coming from, she's genuinely interested and she's not coming from a malicious place. Like, she's not trying to come across as racist. But sometimes, like, one of my friends, she's like, you just got a little racism in your teeth. You just got to pick it out real quick. You know, and it's, like, not coming from a mean spot. I just got to, like, let me just correct you real quick, like, course correct, and then we'll go on our way. So I think what we have there is just, like, she knows that I'm not trying to call her racist. I'm just, like, and then I know from her, she's, like, she's not trying to offend me.
And essentially then is that like, so take what you guys have on a personal level, you're able to maybe have those hard conversations that it sounds like you both grow from, right? Like you're both able to see more of who God is and actually appreciate more of who he's made each of you to be. So like, if you take that on a personal level, if you imagine a local church living in a context that is very diverse, maybe we've all got, a bunch of different skin colors, ethnicities in our neighborhood. What do you think it would take for a church culture to become or to move towards what you and her have? Like a safe place where people can ask questions that may come off wrong. Somebody may actually get offended. So what would that culture look like in your mind?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good question.
Or like, are there steps that a church could take to move there?
Yeah. I would think that it would start with first having more diversity to just like coming from the pulpit, whether that be like different speakers coming in. And then moving into like having, I think what would be awesome for a church to do is to just our first step would be to have like just like a small group night where you kind of lay out the expectation for the night, and then have a bunch of different people. And I think sometimes what happens is you have you have the one black person in the room, and so you ask them all the black questions. So I think having like a lot of like more than just one person of each race in the room, like that would be a great start as well. But just having a time where like, okay, like let's ask them, and maybe it's just the leaders of the church at first, and then you kind of have, and then you will weave some of those same things into like who your small group leaders are, and you kind of have that woven into the conversations. That way then it just becomes like natural. within conversation.
Right. It just becomes part of the church culture.
Yeah, it just becomes like, oh yeah, like we're like, I don't know if politics are ever like, that's just another thing that I feel like people always are like, ugh, about, like it's like race and politics. So similar to like how you would in your, like I think about the church and it's supposed to be a reflection of your home, just like you would talk about I'm hoping people are talking about politics and race naturally in the home. That should happen.
Right. Do you think maybe though that's not actually happening?
Like, I don't think maybe it's not.
Because I think about like even hearing you talk, like so if our local church is just a bunch of people bringing in their family systems, learning to be the kingdom family, I guess it would make sense. Like if Kirsten and I and our girls, if this isn't, even our home isn't a safe place to talk about race, talk about stuff, it would make sense then when we come into a kingdom community, you're bringing all of those backgrounds, makes sense it's not going to work. Or if it is talked about, it just becomes a big blow up because maybe, I don't know, it's very intriguing to me of like what that would actually take. But you're thinking though, like, okay, let me ask you this. You mentioned like diversity on the stage, right? You know, just whether it's a stage or not, just up front. It seems like a dumb question, but I think it's worth asking. Why would that matter? Like, why is that visibility piece important? Yeah.
So I think I think about the first time I went to the church I go to now, and I saw an older black lady on the stage. Like they're one of those churches that like have a bunch of people singing, which I'm like, whatever. But I'm like, do you really need 8 people on the stage singing? But okay, here we are. It's them. They sound great.
It's them.
It's fine, you know. Okay. Diversity. And so, but I saw this older black lady on the stage. Yeah. And I knew, I'm like, okay, like there's someone that has some sort of, because obviously you think of hopefully it's not easy for someone just to get on the stage, right? And she was a worship leader, so like to be in that position, like it takes some effort.
A position of authority within the community. Okay.
So I'm like, okay, like I have an ally. Like that was my first thing. I'm like, okay, there's someone here that has some power, or that has like a significant voice that can that just showed me off the bat that there is diversity at the table of decision making.
So did that for you represent like? Did you feel like, I'm trying with the word, like, did you feel represented? Or what was it about seeing her that for you kind of helped you drop your shoulders?
My immediate feeling was like relief. Like, okay.
Oh, interesting.
Like, I don't have to like fake it as much. Or like, I don't have to like be as white.
You don't have to, like, which is what you grew up.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So it's like, it's just good to know that like, obviously I think in every situation there is a level of professional. I don't know if professionalism is the right word to use, but like, of course, when you're around people that you don't know that well, you're gonna like sit up a little bit more, like no matter your race background.
Just familiarity's not there.
For sure. Like I'm not gonna sit on like put my feet up on the stage, you know. Of course, like but again, it just felt like okay, like I don't have to act as proper as I would like at one of the jobs I've been at before, because it was a very like you know what I mean. So that was my immediate thought, and then to see someone that was Latino on the stage singing, like okay, like there's diversity even on the worship team, and then to see there be diversity in now like going there often in who's speaking, not only in gender but also in race. You know what I mean? It's like okay, like like and in age, which I think is awesome. Like we've had people who were just kind of just coming up being like fresh pastors, we have the senior you know, it's just kind of different people. Yeah. Which is like, okay, like it's nice to know that there's a lot of different people at the table. Yeah. You know.
So when you okay, now let's connect that for a minute, because obviously God's given you a real heart for justice. Yeah. What is it now like? What's it like being part of a local community that for somehow connects to you to even God's heart for justice? Like, do those pieces connect for you?
It does. I feel like it does more on a personal level than it does like on a general level. It allows me to really be able to fully be poured into you, and then I can pour my whole self out into my justice work. Oh, interesting. But what I also love is that justice is a big piece of what happens at that church. And it's cool because I work at a food bank full time. Yeah. So during Thanksgiving, they did a food drive, and I do food drives at the food bank that they were giving to you. So it's just like kind of cool to see it come full circle. Yeah. And it being like a church that's intentionally planted in a spot where there's a lot of different types of people that are able to come and feel welcome and feel like they're at home. Okay, because
knowing you for the years, I know you're a real deep thinker. So I hadn't thought of this before,
No.
but there was a number of years ago, there was this German theologian, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, that I know you're aware of, right? Yeah. He had this moment in his life where he came to America and was a part of an all-black church in, I think, Harlem. I might get the city wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Harlem. Okay. That experience, being a part of that church, like, radically shaped the rest of his life, right? As I read his story. And part of what I remember reading about is that he realized, being a part of that black church, that they understood how to suffer. And for him, that, like, he rediscovered, in a sense, who God was, because he just experienced that. So what do you think it's like? Is there like, when you think of his story, do you like what I'm trying to think what question to ask? What do you think the connection is there? Because I think maybe, like, you've gone through things, you've experienced maybe oppression or even suffering on a level that I haven't, right? Just because maybe you're just based on skin color, we'll just use that. Yeah. So I'm almost wondering, like, do you think the church misses out? Like, it's, like, I don't know if the question makes sense, but, like, if everybody's like me, you're like, the world that you come from, right? The people that you most connect to are going to know some level of oppression or suffering and a history that maybe folks that look like me and talk like me might not be able to connect to. Yeah. I almost wonder sometimes if, like, the church really misses out on a lot of who God is if we don't learn how to suffer. I don't know. Just go wherever you take that. That might have been a ramble. But.
I'm glad. I feel like that's a really good point that I would have not even hit on. I think that's can be a really beautiful piece of diversity in the church, is because without suffering, you don't really know compassion as well as you could. Like, it's not as it's not as evident to you. Yeah. Like, I feel like sometimes white people, like, I don't want to, like, disregard that at all. Like, white people have a real, like, they're really compassionate people, just as anyone who hasn't, like, I think that's just kind of innate with all of us. Like, we don't want people to suffer, like, hopefully no one to suffer. When you've walked through that yourself, I feel like that's a deeper level, because you're like, I don't want you to feel what I'm feeling as deep as I am, or if you are, I want you to, like, have someone walk alongside you in that. And so I feel like that's a really beautiful piece of diversity in the church, if you have that, or you can nourish that, because I feel like if you do, you can really impact people's lives at such a more deep level than if it wasn't there, because you were not aware of it. Right. Yeah. Yeah, because I think, like, even hearing you talk, like, I may like, in my journey, I may be able to go to the place and say, okay, biblically, we know who Jesus is, so here's why compassion matters, because it's who he is. Yeah. But you sound like you're able to connect to that compassion, maybe in a way that I haven't. Sure. That I do wonder sometimes if, without the diversity of the church, not just like, oh, we got diversity on our website, right? Like, but actually, like you said, living it out. Yeah. I just wonder sometimes if we do miss a lot of who God is, because, like, even just hearing your story, knowing you over the years, you've lived out a side of suffering I've not, just based on how God has made you, which I think is real. And so I learned, like, hearing your story, because you can connect to something I haven't personally walked through. Yeah. I don't know, I just wonder sometimes, like you said, those conversations seem to be off limits. Yeah. But when we don't have them, we miss that. So yeah, you can isolate a whole group of people, or you can miss a whole piece of a person. Yeah. Because, and you can't, like, I feel like you also, like, can't, what's the word? Sometimes I feel like you won't be able to tap into your whole potential as a person or as a church if you're not able to, like, you're not going to be able to grow as you want to, and really tangibly be the hands and feet if you're not able to, like, literally, like, hand in hand walk with people. And I think it's okay if people haven't gone through the same suffering, but I think it's important to have people in your life that can kind of check you on it if you know. All right, so given that, let me ask you this, because maybe this will be helpful for folks listening, because I know it's been a journey of Kirsten and I. So I might be in the place, being white, like, and talking to you as a black woman, I might think, well, I haven't really I don't know how to connect to what you've gone through. Sure. So I'm not even sure how to start the conversation, or I don't even know how to ask you, hey, talk to me about suffering. Is that a horrible question? Is that so? Like, even if you were going to speak to my community, like to the white community, who says, gosh, I really want to learn. I
I really want to learn. I want to hear the stories. Like, what would you say to folks that look and sound and talk like me?
Yeah, I would say, that's it. Like, how do I word this? I would say go in it with open ears and just, I think sometimes the hardest thing is you're afraid of asking the wrong question, so you don't ask the question.
Right, and I could easily see myself there.
Yeah. And I think the hardest thing is to just ask the question and be okay with whatever the answer is. Like, sometimes I think because of privilege, and I see to myself even like as I've learned about like other, like as being an American and having the privilege of just being like an American like citizen.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, like I wouldn't have even thought of that, like, because so in the same sense, asking the question and just being okay with the answer and don't try to like excuse it or like dismiss it. Like, I think sometimes because sometimes the suffering is due to like systemic racism. For example, like students, this wasn't my experience, but just thinking about conversations I've had in the past, like talking about people only getting jobs or only getting into schools because of their skin color or like XYZ, and then the person who's white being like, well, because I wasn't poor enough. Like that can be like super like, well, hold on. Yeah. And then you just kind of get on the defense versus if you just let that person like have the floor and be it like let the cards fall with it. Yeah. With whether like however it affects you, just like being, and I feel like in any conversation, like don't automatically go on the defense. Because then you can really learn how, even like it kind of will open your eyes like, okay, even though this wasn't my, like, I'm not the person who made this rule about whatever. I've benefited from it in a productive way. Like, listen to how the same system who has rigged it for good for you has rigged it for bad for someone else. Okay. I feel like sometimes that's what is hard about the conversation and makes it hard for people of color to even talk about it because it's like, I want, like, I feel like sometimes people want to go through it or want to talk about it, but then they can't because it's like
it's gonna get dismissed.
Your experience is dismissed because that person hasn't experienced it. Right. It's like, but no, like this happens. Like when I go through the store and I have a hood on, like I get watched and I get followed because of my skin tone. Like, and that doesn't happen for you, but sometimes I've had people be like, well, that doesn't happen. I'm like, not to you.
Right. And why do you think, let's say this was us and we just met. Sure. You told me that story. Mm-hmm. I know what it's like to walk into a place with a hood on and get looked at. Like, what do you think it is in me that would dismiss that? Well, I haven't seen that. What do you think that is? I mean, I know we can all do that, but let's just take this context. Sure. What do you think it would be in me that would dismiss your experience?
I think it's because I can't speak for every person, but I think a piece of it is because they don't want to believe it for themselves. Like, there's no way that people are like that. Yeah. Like, have that lens on. Right. But if you think about like when I'm even like guilty of this and seeing how it like society and culture has even shaped me as a person of color. Like you see a very dark skinned guy walking down the road, you automatically like clench, start clenching your wallet or clenching your bag because it's just like kind of been the system. But you don't see that when you see a white guy walking. You're just like, oh, what's up, dude? Like, how you doing? But let that be, like, if I were to have that conversation with that person and like they like saw me come, like let's say they saw me with clenching my bag as they walked up and we had a conversation like that really hurt me. Like, why would you think that? If I were to be like, oh, well, like I didn't know what you were going to do. It's like, no, like let them have their story. That's their experience. And how they felt about that is how they felt about that. And that's valid. So I feel like sometimes that's why I feel like I got on a long tangent, but
no, I think it's all part of the conversation, honestly. Well, it has to be talked through. Yeah. I think there are things that need to be talked through. And
so I feel like sometimes that's where the hesitation is on the person of color to even share. But also I think that's a piece of the person who, like, if you want to open the door, you got to like let the door be open.
Okay. So here's a question giving you hearing you talk about this, I think, okay, so there's almost two seem to be competing realities, even though I know they're not, but I'd love to hear your just talk on maybe the tension. So, okay, how do we walk out, or maybe how do you walk out being a person of color who can connect to a system that can be unjust and owning that part of your story, and yet also knowing in Jesus you are victorious, so thus you're not a victim, and yet, like, how do those things connect? I don't know what the question is almost, but like, you can walk out and, like, your history say, well, no, I know what it's like to be on the oppressed end of things, but I also know in Jesus I'm victorious in the kingdom. Yeah. How do those connect, or do they?
Yeah. No, I think, I'm trying to think about how to, I get exactly where you're coming from.
Because I could almost see myself, like, as a white male saying to you, like, almost dismissing your experience because I go super spiritual. Oh, well, you're victorious in Jesus. Yeah. Which is, like, I could see that conversation happening. Yeah. And then your whole story is dismissed, where you can, but both of those are real for you. Yeah. Both realities. So. Yeah.
And I think how it plays in for me is it that it's a yes and conversation for me, at least. It's like, yes, I am like a victim in this space. I think about, like, things that have happened, like, because of my race, and it's like, okay, like, yes, this happened, and there's a time and place to, like, correct that in this space, but it's like, it's almost like a hope, like, but I hold on to the hope that, like, I know that I am X in Jesus, like, I am worthy in Jesus, like, the Lord has not messed up with me on this, and it's not him that's doing this to me, it's the actions of other human beings that are broken. So that's kind of how I go. Like, I feel like it's a yes and for me. It's like, yes, this is happening, and there's something, like, it's not okay. Right. But this is what's happening to me currently. Right. But I don't have to stay in this space. Right. That's kind of how I think about it. It's like, this is happening. Yes. Like, I need to live in this reality, and but I think about it almost like, okay, like, my mom always tells me, like, when I'm upset, like, okay, you can, like, lay on the ground and cry about it, and, like, yes, but you need to, like, get back up. Okay. And stand back up. So it's like, I think sometimes people of color kind of will get jaded or, like, angry at the world because, which I can understand. Yeah. Like, I get. But also just having that peace of mind, like, okay, like, I know that this isn't where I'll be all, like, this isn't my home.
It's not the final say in that sense.
It's not the final, exactly.
All right, so let me ask you this. Final question here, given where the conversation's going. So, with where you're at and what you've experienced, and make it as personal as you would like to on this one, what is your hope for the church? Yeah. Right? Like, if you were to speak to a group of leaders, maybe it's your own local church, like, what do you think needs to be said? Like, what would you want to say to the body of Christ?
Yeah. Ooh, this is a good question. I would say that we need. Okay, I would say that there needs to be. The word I would use is that we need a longer table.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
I think sometimes they're just because of. I think there's just not enough voices at the table to help with like decision making, whether that decision making at the smallest or largest point of the view. So I think that would be like my word or whatever it is. Like, I think we need a longer table in a sense that because I feel like the more diversity and inclusion that you have at the table, that trickles down. You can see that even like in a business way, like the healthier your top managers are, that will trickle down into your your workers. Okay. So that would be what I would say. It's like, have a heart for a longer table and have a heart for what those voices and people mean in the cultures that they represent.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no problem.
It's just sweet talking to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, French, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Cool.
Glad to be here.
Well, everybody, grace and peace, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.